Hello families, my name is Miss Sam. I am the Data and Assessment Coach here at Amber Inwood, and this video is on iReady Diagnostic, how to use and read the scores. This video will be sectioned on the bottom. You can see the different topics that are covered in this video, just in case there's a section that you would like to return back to or would like to fast forward to. You can see that on the bottom screen. First, let's get into what exactly is iReady. iReady is an online platform that serves as an individual tool for each student. Here we'll see something called a MyPath, and MyPath are lessons created by the diagnostic based on what each student needs. Let's talk about what the diagnostic is. The diagnostic test happens 3 times a year. It happens once in September, once in January, and once at the end of the school year in May. So that initial diagnostic test determines how the MyPath is going to work. So these questions that students are going to get are going to be really hard, then really easy until it finds the perfect fit for each individual student. As we know, in a classroom of first grade or second grade, not all students are on the same level or learn the same way. And this diagnostic test really helps us to understand each student's individual learning needs. And their MyPath created allows for the student to work on skills that they themselves need instead of having a standardized set of skills that all students are doing. This is really looking at the individual student. So here, just as mentioned, the questions are going to continue until it finds the perfect fit for your student. And this will give us results to help us know how to best support them. Now, what happens after? After a student takes a diagnostic test, teachers can instantaneously gather a report on that. We'll be able to see growth, placement based on standards, and be able to understand what domains each student needs more support in. Based on this information, we can then create intentional small groups and give intentional work. Now let's look at the reports. How do I read this and what does this mean? So first, these are some keywords you're going to see: mid or above grade level, early on grade level, 1 grade below, 2 grades below, approaching the grade level. And what this is based off of is called a typical growth. Typical growth is a standardized section of where a first grader, second grader, kindergartner should be projected based on the nation. So if we took 100 first graders from all across the nation, this is where the average would be for that first grader. So the scores that you're going to see are based on that. However, we do have something called a stretch growth. And that's going back to this mindset of each individual has different learning styles and learning skills. A stretch growth is projected in September based on the iReady scores, and it lets us know what would be a good stretch growth for that student for where they should be that mid-level year. But we're going to be looking at the reports based on typical growth. So here's an example of a reading report, and we're going to come back to this as well. But some things I'm noticing here are the growth from one test to another and the different domains. Now, before we really dive into how to read this report, I want to go through each of the domains for reading and math so we can understand what each of these domains are representing. So reading. Reading has 6 different domains. The first 4 domains are phonological awareness, phonics, high frequency words, and vocabulary. Now, phonics is being able to connect a print letter to a sound. So being able to see a print letter and make that sound. This helps with decoding when it's time for reading. And phonological awareness is the manipulation of these sounds to make words, to make rhymes, to make alliteration. So taking it the next level from phonics to phonological awareness. High frequency words are words that students are going to encounter a lot when reading. These words are often memorized because they are a little bit difficult to decode using phonics. So these words can be done with flashcards. You set up a routine to do that at home so that students are getting exposed to these words and can just memorize and read them. Next is vocabulary, and vocabulary is understanding what exactly a word means, especially in relation to a topic. But in this example, the topic is Thanksgiving, and these are vocabulary words that are going to help a student comprehend and understand what the Thanksgiving passage is about or what the Thanksgiving story is about. My next two categories are comprehension literature, comprehension informational text. And this is fiction versus nonfiction. Fiction has plots, character stories, beginning, middle, end. Children normally gravitate towards fiction stories more because they are deemed more interesting. Students have less exposure to informational texts, and those are our science-based, social studies-based, those texts that are specifically looking at one topic and giving a lot of information on that. That's where students normally shy away from. And this is an area that more students need to support in. So informational text ties beautifully to vocabulary, is through these informational texts, students will learn a lot more vocabulary. We're going to see something called a lexile level. You will see this on your report. And a lexile level lets you know what independently your student can read. So using tools like the Lexile book tool, you can find what books a student can read independent. And here is our beginning, middle, end of that typical growth of where each student should be based on their grade level. So if my student is in kindergarten, based on the typical growth, my student will be beginning at a 362. On that January mark, they're going to be hitting the 396. At the end of the school year, they'll be hitting that 479. So you can take a moment to pause this video, take a look at where your child is, what grade they're at, and what the typical growth is saying they're projecting to be on. Now let's go into the different math domains. We have 4 domains for math. That's numbers and operations, algebra and algebraic thinking, measurement and data, and geometry. Numbers and operations is being able to use and manipulate our different types of operations: multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. Algebra and algebraic thinking are being able to decompose and compose numbers and being able to find out when one of our numbers are missing. Measurement and data, being able to measure things in different ways: weight, height, width, length. And of course, geometry, being able to recognize shapes and being able to manipulate shapes. I know math is being taught in a different way than maybe a lot of us growing up have learned. There's different phrases like decomposing and composing, but there are definitely resources to help parents to understand the newer way of teaching math as well. Here you'll see something called a quantile level, and that's the equivalent to the lexile level, but for math. And it lets you know based on your student's score of what math abilities they can produce independently. And here is that typical growth for math. So that beginning, middle, and end for our math scores. So again, take a minute to pause this video, take a look at where your student is and where they're projected to be. Now we are going to look at reading your student's report. Pause this video, get that report. There should be a physical copy and a digital copy. Put it in front of you to really help you to read the report while we're doing this video together. Now let's go back and take a look at that ELA report. So if I was reading this for my student, first thing I want to look at is the growth from that fall diagnostic to the winter diagnostic. And here my student grew in September. They were right here, but they grew 54 points and were able to be on grade level at this point. Now, don't be discouraged if you do not see high growth or growth from September to the winter, because there's ways that we can get our students to continue to grow. Now, here's the domains that we just talked about, and I want to look at how my student did in this domain. So here I can see in phonological awareness, they tested out. In phonics, they were at an approaching grade 2, and now they're at a grade 2. Here I see for high frequency words, and in the beginning, they were at approaching grade 2, and now they have max score. So that is an area that I'm definitely going to celebrate with my student because they maxed out of high frequency words. Here is vocabulary. It went from approaching grade 2 to grade 2. Again, a lot of celebration should be had here. Our students are moving, they're growing, they're learning. This is fantastic. Comprehension literature, Again, we see some growth here. However, something that I'm noticing is that my student needs a little bit more support in informational text. And it's just as we mentioned, students tend to gravitate more towards fiction and don't really gravitate towards informational text. But something I can do for my student at home to combine two domains together, and I recommend only focusing on two domains, not focusing on all of them. It's better to do two of them really, really well than just hit a little bit of each domain. So here I'm going to focus on two. I'm going to focus on vocabulary and focus on informational text, since they both work in tandem together. So when I'm having my student read more informational text, they will be gaining more vocabulary. So just by implementing this at home, on the next iReady diagnostic score, we can definitely project to see some increasing there. Take a look at our math. Let me just clear my board. Here for math, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to look at the growth. Where did my student start in the fall? And where did my student end up in the winter? And really knowing that there's going to be another diagnostic at the end of the school year as well. That's when all of the information taught from the beginning of the year to the end of the year should be sitting in our students' brains. And here I'm seeing some growth as well from 51 points. And now I'm seeing in this green level, this green level right here is the on grade level, the projected where they should be. And based on that grade, based on, of course, the standardized version, I'm seeing that my student was able to approach that green level. Now, in the domains, I'm going to take a look and see how much growth happened in each domain and which domain I want to pick to really focus on at home. So here, I'm going to focus on my numbers and operations for home, because that seems to be the lowest domain for my student, since they're still at an approaching grade 1 area. So take a second to pause the video, take a look at these two different domains, identify one domain for reading and one domain for math that you can work on at home. Now, here's some resources that we can use to help our students to improve. You will be receiving this PDF of an at-home learning resource site. Now, this site has a lot of different math and ELA resources. You would just have to press on the website and just use this password here. And you'll be able to access some documents, some math, some reading in English and reading in Spanish. Now, these are packets that could be printed, but of course, if there is not a printer, these packets can be used as a resource or a stepping stone to know what questions in that domain can you be asking students, what does questions in that domain even look like, and how to support your student going forward. Here's an example. If I know my student is working on numbers and operations, I can find one of those areas, take a look at this worksheet, either printed or I can use this as a tool to help my student. Of course, the biggest resource we have is each other, right? We are a team working with the same goal because we want our students to grow and prosper. So of course, teaming up with your teacher's teacher and teacher assistant in the classroom and really setting some plans, setting some goals, asking for some resources is going to help our students immensely. If you have any questions, please reach out to either your classroom teachers or reach out to operations. We are always here to help, always willing to provide some resources, to provide some more insight on these reports as well. Thank you so much. And we look forward to continue to partnering and having our students grow. Thank you.